Marcus was only 12 years old when his life changed. His father had just gotten a new job in another city, and the whole family had to move. For Marcus, it felt like leaving everything behind: his old friends, his school, and even the playground where he used to play basketball every evening. The new place looked bigger, faster, and very different. The buildings were taller, the people walked quickly, and the streets felt strange to him. He tried to stay strong because he didn't want his parents to see his fear. But deep inside, Marcus was nervous. On the morning of his first day at the new school, Marcus put on his best shirt. His mother reminded him to smile, to be polite, and to stay confident. She said, "Remember, you are strong. Just be yourself, and everything will be fine." Marcus nodded, even though his stomach was twisting with worry. He looked in the mirror and whispered to himself, "I can do this." The walk to school was filled with new sights. Kids were playing on the sidewalks. Parents hurried to work, and cars zoomed past. Marcus clutched his backpack tightly, almost like it was a shield to protect him. When he reached the tall school building, he paused at the gate, took a deep breath, and walked in. The halls were crowded, students were laughing and talking in groups, and everyone seemed to already know each other. Marcus tried to blend in, but he couldn't ignore the fact that he looked different. His skin was darker, his accent was slightly different, and his clothes weren't like the brand new ones many of the other kids wore. As he walked down the hallway, some kids glanced at him curiously. A few whispered to each other, while others just stared. Marcus kept his eyes forward and pretended not to notice, but each glance made him feel smaller inside. In his first class, the teacher introduced him. "Everyone, this is Marcus. He's new to our school, so let's make him feel welcome." Some kids smiled politely, but others simply looked away. Marcus forced a smile and sat down at his desk. The room felt quiet to him, even though it was filled with noise. Cute. Hear pencils scratching on paper and the murmur of voices. But he felt as though a wall separated him from everyone else. At lunch, Marcus carried his tray to an empty table. He wanted someone to invite him to sit with them, but no one did. Groups of kids laughed together, sharing snacks and stories. Marcus ate slowly, staring at his food, hoping someone might notice him. But most kids acted as if he wasn't there. Still, Marcus told himself it was only the first day, maybe tomorrow would be better. After school, he walked home with heavy steps. The air outside was fresh, but his heart felt heavy. His parents asked how the day went. Marcus didn't want to disappoint them, so he said it was okay. He left out the part about the whispers and the loneliness. He didn't want them to worry. That night, Marcus lay in bed, thinking about the day. He wondered why it was so hard to fit in. He wasn't a bad kid. He liked reading, sports, and making jokes with his friends. Back in his old neighborhood, people knew him. Here, he felt invisible, or worse, like a target. Still, he remembered his mother's words, "Be yourself, and everything will be fine." So, Marcus made a promise to himself. No matter how tough it got, he wouldn't give up. He would keep trying, keep smiling, and keep showing up every day. Deep down, he believed that one day the kids at school would see who he really was, not just a newcomer, not just someone different, but a boy with dreams, courage, and a heart that refused to give up. The beginning of his new life wasn't easy. But Marcus didn't know that this very struggle would shape him into someone stronger than he ever imagined. Marcus's second day at the new school began with a little more hope. He woke up early, carefully combed his hair, and chose his favorite sneakers. He thought, maybe today will be different. Maybe I'll make a friend. He tried to push away the heavy feeling from yesterday and repeated the words his mother always told him. Stay strong. People will see your heart one day. When he walked into the school gates, the sun was shining and the air felt crisp. Students were already crowding the halls, lockers slamming, laughter echoing. Marcus clutched his backpack straps and walked with a steady pace. He told himself, just blend in, don't stand out. But blending in was not easy for Marcus. His skin was darker than most kids around him. His voice had a different rhythm when he spoke. And even his energy carried something new that made him stand out. Whether he wanted to or not, it was in his second period class that Marcus had his first real encounter. He was sitting quietly at his desk, trying to copy notes from the board. A group of 3 boys sat behind him, whispering and chuckling. At first, Marcus ignored it. But then he heard one of them say in a mocking tone, "Hey, new kid, where? Are you from Africa or something?" The other 2 laughed. Marcus froze. He wasn't from Africa. He was born right here in the country, just like them. But the way they said it, with that smirk, wasn't a real question. It was meant to sting. Marcus turned slightly and said in a calm voice, "I'm from here, just like you." He wanted to leave it at that, but the boys weren't finished. Another one leaned forward and whispered louder, "Yeah, but you don't look like us. Maybe you got lost on your way here." Their laughter grew louder. Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment. Some kids in the class turned their heads, but no one said anything. The teacher kept writing on the board, unaware of what was happening. During recess, Marcus walked out to the playground, hoping for some peace. He sat on a bench, watching kids play basketball. He wanted to join, but didn't know how to ask. Then he noticed the same group of boys walking toward him. His heart sank. Well, if it isn't the newcomer," one of them sneered. "What's your name again?" "Marcus." He dragged out the name as though it was strange to say. Marcus nodded politely. "Yeah, my name's Marcus." The tallest boy smirked. Marcus thinks he's smart. Look at him, sitting all by himself. Don't you have friends? Or did they all leave you behind in your old town? The others burst out laughing again. Marcus clenched his fists inside his pockets. He wanted to shout, wanted to defend himself, but instead, he said nothing. He looked away, pretending their words didn't matter. Yet inside, he felt each word cutting into him like a blade. One of the boys suddenly reached for his backpack. "What do you even have in here?" "Rocks," he joked, trying to pull it off Marcus's shoulder. Marcus yanked it back quickly, his eyes flashing with anger. For the first time, he said firmly, "Stop. Don't touch my stuff." "Something in?" His voice made them pause for a second. But then the tallest boy narrowed his eyes and said, "Oh, so the new kid's got some fight, huh?" He stepped closer, but before anything else could happen, the bell rang, calling everyone back to class. The boys snickered and walked off, muttering insults under their breath. Marcus sat there for a moment, breathing heavily. His heart was racing. He felt both angry and helpless. Angry because they had no right to treat him that way, and helpless because he knew this was only the beginning. That night, Marcus couldn't eat much dinner. His parents noticed, but when they asked how his day went, he just forced a smile and said it was fine. Inside, though, he was replaying every word the bullies said. The way they laughed, the way they looked at him as if he didn't belong. He lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. Questions swirled in his mind. Why me? Why can't they just see me for who I am? Will it always be like this? But mixed with the pain was also a spark of determination. A small voice inside whispered, "Don't let them break you. You're stronger than they think." The first encounter with the bullies had left Marcus shaken, but it also planted something deeper inside him. He didn't know it yet, but every cruel word, every shove, every laugh would become the fuel that pushed him to grow stronger. The bullies thought they were tearing him down, but in truth, they were building the fire inside him that one day would make him unstoppable. Marcus hoped the bullying would stop after that first encounter, but things only got worse. The boys had found their target, and every day they seemed to come up with new ways to make his life harder. It wasn't just the whispers anymore, it became constant in the hallways. When Marcus walked past, they would stick their feet out, trying to trip him. Sometimes they succeeded, and his books would scatter across the floor. The boys would laugh while Marcus scrambled to pick them up. Other students saw it, but most stayed silent. A few even joined in with nervous laughter, not because they hated Marcus, but because they were afraid of becoming the next target. In the cafeteria, the bullying became louder. The boys would shout across the room, "Hey, newcomer! Why don't you go back where you came from?" Their voices carried over the tables, making Marcus's chest tighten. He would try to focus on his food, but each bite tasted like ashes. Some kids looked away, embarrassed for him, while others just watched. Marcus often ate quickly, then left before they had the chance to say more. One afternoon in gym class, the boys went further than ever. The class was playing basketball, and Marcus was excited because basketball was something he loved. He thought maybe if he played well, the others would see who he really was. When the ball came to him, Marcus dribbled quickly, dodging defenders and shooting perfectly into the hoop. For a moment, he felt a spark of joy. But the bullies didn't like it. "Lucky shot," one of them shouted. Then, as Marcus ran past, another boy shoved him hard in the chest. Marcus stumbled and fell on the court, scraping his elbow. The gym echoed with laughter. The teacher blew the whistle and told everyone to calm down, but he didn't see the shove. To him, it looked like an accident. Marcus bit his lip and got up, hiding the pain in his eyes. At home, he started pretending everything was fine. He didn't want to worry his parents, who were already adjusting to their new life. His father worked long hours at the new job, and his mother was trying to make their new house feel like a home. So, Marcus smiled at the dinner table, even though inside, he was crumbling. The bullying didn't just stay at school. On the way home, the boys sometimes followed him. They would trail behind, calling him names, mocking the way he spoke, or making fun of his dark skin. "Look at him," one of them jeered. "Bet he doesn't even belong in this neighborhood." Marcus tried to ignore them, but each word stuck in his chest like a thorn. The worst moment came one rainy afternoon. Marcus was walking home alone when the three boys caught up with him. They blocked his path, circling him like wolves. "Hey, newcomer," the tallest one said with a smirk. "You think you're tough, huh? Talking back in class, scoring shots in gym. Maybe we need to remind you who's in charge here." Before Marcus could reply, one of them slapped his backpack, knocking it off his shoulder and into the mud. His notebooks and papers spilled out, getting wet and dirty. Marcus dropped to his knees, trying to save his work, but the boys just laughed. One of them kicked a notebook farther into the puddle. Marcus's throat tightened. He wanted to scream, to fight back, to say something sharp and clever, but no words came. His eyes burned, but he refused to let tears fall. Slowly, he gathered his muddy papers, put them back in the backpack, and stood up. He stared at the bullies with quiet fire in his eyes. "Are you done?" he asked, his voice low but steady. The boys blinked, surprised by his calmness. Then the tallest one sneered. "For now?" They shoved past him and walked away, laughing again. Marcus stood there in the rain. His clothes wet, his books ruined, his heart heavy. He felt anger rising inside him like a storm. But under that anger, there was something else, something stronger. It was the realization that he could not keep letting them control his life. He might not be able to stop them today, but he would not let their words and actions define who he was. That night, Marcus stayed up late. He cleaned his notebooks, as best as he could, rewriting his lessons on fresh paper. Each word he wrote felt like a promise to himself. He whispered, "They can try to break me, but I won't let them." The bullying had escalated, turning crueler and heavier each day. But with every shove, every insult, and every cruel laugh. Marcus's spirit was slowly transforming. He didn't see it yet, but the fire inside him was growing. The more they pushed, the more determination he built. The bullies thought they were winning, but in truth, they were shaping the boy who would soon rise against them unstoppable. Marcus had been trying to stay strong for weeks, but the bullying kept growing heavier. Every day felt like walking into a storm. No matter how much he ignored the whispers, no matter how hard he tried to stay invisible, the bullies always seemed to find him. His heart grew tired, and each night he lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how much longer he could endure it. It was a gray Thursday afternoon when everything reached the breaking point. The day had already been rough. In math, Class 1 of the bullies had tossed a crumpled paper at Marcus's head while the teacher's back was turned. In history, another had mocked the way Marcus raised his hand to answer a question. By the time lunch arrived, Marcus's patience was stretched thin. He sat at a table in the corner, trying to eat quietly, but of course, they found him. 3. Boys approached, grinning like they had planned something. The cafeteria was loud, filled with chatter and laughter. But Marcus's world narrowed when they surrounded his table. "Look at him, sitting all by himself," one of them sneered. "Hey, maybe we should give him some company." Without warning, the tallest boy slammed his hand down on Marcus's tray, knocking his food to the floor. The sound of the tray crashing echoed through the room. Kids nearby turned to look. Oh. Some giggled nervously, others whispered, but nobody moved to help. Marcus froze. He stared at the mess on the floor, his face burning with shame. His stomach twisted, not just from hunger, but from the humiliation of being treated like this in front of everyone. The bullies laughed louder, proud of the attention they were getting. "What's the matter, newcomer?" another boy taunted. "Don't like our welcome party?" Marcus clenched his fists under the table. His whole body trembled, not with fear this time, but with a fire that had been building inside him for weeks. He was tired of being silent. He was tired of pretending their words didn't matter. His heart pounded as he stood up slowly, looking each bully in the eye. "Stop it," Marcus said firmly. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a strength that surprised even him. The laughter around him faded slightly. The bullies exchanged quick glances, caught off guard by his sudden boldness. Then the tallest one smirked and leaned closer. "Or what?" he challenged. "What are you gonna do, huh?" For a moment, Marcus felt the weight of every eye in the cafeteria. He could feel the pressure building, as if the entire room was waiting for his answer. He thought of all the times he stayed quiet, all the nights he cried silently into his pillow, all the mornings he forced himself to walk into school, knowing what was waiting. Something inside him snapped. Marcus straightened his shoulders and said in a steady, unshaken voice, "You don't get to decide who I am. You don't get to tell me I don't belong. You can laugh, you can push, you can try to break me, but you won't win. I'm not afraid of you." The cafeteria went silent. For the first time, Marcus wasn't running, wasn't shrinking. He was standing tall, his words sharp and clear. The bullies blinked, not expecting him to fight back, not with fists, but with words that cut deeper than anything they had said to him. The tallest boy's smirk faded. He muttered, "Whatever," and turned away, trying to act like it didn't matter. But Marcus saw it, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The others followed, grumbling under their breath. But they didn't touch him again that day. Marcus sat back down, his heart racing. His hands were still trembling, but this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from power. For the first time, he had spoken his truth, and he hadn't broken. The bullies hadn't expected that, and neither had Marcus. After school, Marcus walked home with his head a little higher. The rain had cleared, and the sky was opening into blue. He thought about what had happened, replaying his own voice in his head. "You won't win. I'm not afraid of you." Those words gave him strength. They were more than just a reply to the bullies. They were a promise to himself. At home, when his mother asked about his day, Marcus smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. "It was different," he said. She didn't ask more, but she noticed the light in his eyes and the way his shoulders no longer slumped with exhaustion. That night, Marcus lay in bed, but he didn't stare at the ceiling in despair. Instead, he thought about the moment he stood up in the cafeteria, the silence that followed, and the way the bullies had walked away. He realized that standing up didn't mean fighting with fists. Sit meant refusing to be broken. The breaking point wasn't just the worst moment he had endured, was the turning moment. The moment he discovered his own voice. And once Marcus found that voice, nothing could silence it again. The bullies thought they had cornered him, but instead, they had unlocked a new fire inside him. From this day on, Marcus would no longer walk with fear. He would walk with courage, ready to face whatever came next. After the day in the cafeteria, something inside Marcus changed. For weeks, he had carried the weight of shame, fear, and anger. But now, for the first time, he felt a spark of control. He realized that he couldn't stop the bullies from being cruel, but he could decide how he would respond. He could either let them define him more. He could rise above them. Marcus chose the second path. The very next morning, he woke up earlier than usual. Instead of dragging himself out of bed, he sat for a moment and whispered the same words he had spoken to the bullies. "You don't get to decide who I am." He repeated it like a quiet prayer, letting the words sink into his heart. Then he dressed, packed his bag neatly, and walked to school with a little more steadiness in his steps. In class, Marcus stopped trying to be invisible. He began to raise his hand more often, even though the bullies sometimes snickered when he spoke. At first, his voice trembled, but slowly his confidence grew. Teachers started to notice. One history teacher even said, "Marcus, that's an excellent point," which made Marcus's chest fill with pride. After school, instead of running home to hide, Marcus stayed behind on the basketball court. He dribbled, practiced layups, and took shot after shot until the sun began to dip. Basketball was his safe space. It was where his body felt alive, where his mind could escape, and where his heart felt free. The bullies might laugh in class, but on the court, Marcus knew who he was. He was fast, sharp, and skilled. One afternoon, a coach noticed him practicing alone. He walked over and said, "You've got talent, kid. Why don't you join the school team?" Marcus hesitated, remembering the bullies who were also on that team, but then he thought of the fire inside him. He nodded. "Yes, sir. I'd like that." Joining the basketball team became a turning point. At first, it wasn't easy. The bullies sneered during practice, trying to shake his focus, but Marcus ignored them and kept working harder than anyone else. When others gave up during drills, Marcus pushed through. When the coach asked for volunteers to run extra laps, Marcus stepped forward. Slowly, the coach began to trust him, and even some teammates started respecting him for his dedication. But Marcus's growth wasn't just on the court. At home, he poured his energy into books. He studied harder, determined to prove that he wasn't just strong in body, but also sharp in mind. His grades improved, and his teachers began praising his work. Each compliment, each small achievement, built another brick of confidence inside him. The bullies still tried to get under his skin, but Marcus had learned a new skill: patience. When they whispered insults, he didn't react. When they laughed, he kept walking. Instead of letting their words sting, he treated them like background noise. Their cruelty no longer had the same power, because Marcus was discovering something they could never touch: his inner strength. One rainy evening, Marcus sat by his window, listening to the drops tapping against the glass. He thought about everything. He had been through the loneliness, the pain, the humiliation. Instead of feeling weak, he felt proud. "I'm still here," he whispered to himself. "They tried to break me, but I'm still standing." At school, some kids began to notice the change. They saw how Marcus walked taller, how he answered confidently in class, how he pushed himself on the basketball court. A few even started talking to him, asking about his interests, his favorite music, his favorite books. Slowly, the walls of isolation began to crack. Marcus didn't become popular overnight, but he no longer cared about popularity. He cared about growth. Each day he reminded himself, "I am more than their words. I am more than their hate." The bullies had wanted to crush him, but they had unknowingly given him the greatest gift: resilience. Every cruel laugh, every shove, every insult had become fuel for his determination. They were sharpening him like steel in fire. Marcus didn't just survive, he began to thrive. His inner strength wasn't loud or flashy, was quiet, steady, and unshakable. It was the kind of strength that couldn't be taken away, no matter how many times someone tried to push him down. And deep inside, Marcus knew this was only the beginning. His journey wasn't over. The battles weren't finished. But now, he carried something the bullies didn't have: a spirit that could not be broken. The weeks turned into months. And slowly, the school began to notice something different about Marcus. The boy who once sat alone at lunch, quiet and afraid, was no longer the same. He still walked the same halls, sat in the same classrooms, and played on the same basketball court, but his presence had changed. He carried himself with a calm confidence, the kind that didn't need to shout or boast. It began with small things. In class, Marcus was no longer the quiet new kid. He raised his hand often, answering with thought and clarity. Teachers saw the spark in him and encouraged it. "Excellent point, Marcus," one teacher would say. "Very insightful answer." Another would add. Each word of praise chipped away at the old image others had of him, the lonely newcomer. Then came basketball. At first, Marcus had been nervous to join the team, especially since some of the bullies played too. But instead of letting them shake his focus, Marcus used every insult and sneer as motivation. When they laughed at him for missing a shot, he stayed longer after practice, shooting until the court lights went out. When they shoved him during scrimmages, he got back up and played harder. His determination didn't go unnoticed. The coach began calling him one of the most hard-working players on the team. Soon, Marcus was no longer just filling a spot on the bench, he was scoring points in real games. One Friday night, during a heated match, he dribbled past two defenders and made the winning shot. The crowd erupted with cheers. For the first time since moving, Marcus felt the roar of approval. He wasn't invisible anymore. Even classmates who had once ignored him began to approach him. "Hey Marcus, that shot was amazing," one said. Another added, "You're really good. Want to practice together sometime?" Marcus smiled politely, grateful but humble. He didn't let the attention change who he was. Instead, he let it fuel his quiet mission to prove that he was more than the labels others had tried to stick on him. Outside of sports, Marquez's reputation grew in other ways too. One day in the library, he saw a younger student being teased for mispronouncing a word while reading. Marcus stepped in. "Hey, don't laugh. Reading out loud is hard sometimes. You'll get better." The younger student looked at him with gratitude, while the others grew quiet, embarrassed. Word of his kindness spread slowly, and people began to see Marcus not just as a strong player on the court, but as someone who stood up for others. The bullies, however, weren't happy. They had enjoyed having Marcus as their target, but now things were changing. Their jokes didn't land the same way anymore. When they mocked him, some kids rolled their eyes instead of laughing. When they tried to trip him in the hall, Marcus just kept walking, unfazed. It was as though their power over him was slipping away. One afternoon, during practice, the tallest bully shoved Marcus harder than usual, trying to spark a fight. Marcus stumbled, but didn't fall. He turned, looked him straight in the eye, and simply said, "That won't stop me." Then he picked up the ball and kept playing. The team noticed. For the first time, some of the bully's own friends didn't laugh. They shook their heads instead. Realizing Marcus wasn't someone to be humiliated anymore. At home, Marcus's parents saw the transformation too. His father, who once worried about Marcus's silence, now saw his son studying late into the night, determined to excel. His mother noticed the way Marcus smiled more often, the way his shoulders were straighter, his voice steadier. "You're growing into a fine young man," she told him one evening. Marcus grinned shyly, but inside, he felt proud. The biggest change, however, was inside Marcus himself. He no longer carried the heavy weight of shame. Instead, he carried purpose. He realized that he didn't have to prove himself to the bullies. He had to prove himself to himself. He began setting goals: better grades, stronger basketball skills, more acts of kindness. Each goal he achieved made him feel unstoppable. And, slowly, people began to follow his example. A few students who once stayed silent during bullying now spoke up. Some even started joining Marcus for after-school practice or study groups. His courage was contagious. The same boy who had once eaten alone in the cafeteria now had classmates choosing to sit beside him. Not out of pity, but out of respect. Marcus had transformed not into someone new, but into the person he was always meant to be. Strong, determined, compassionate. The bullies hadn't broken him. Instead, they had unknowingly forged him into a leader. He was no longer just the newcomer. He was Marcus, the boy who refused to be crushed. The boy who turned pain into power. The boy whose strength shined so brightly that even darkness couldn't cover it anymore. And though he didn't yet realize it fully, his journey was just beginning. Bigger challenges lay ahead, but now Marcus knew. No matter what came his way, he had the strength to rise above it. The days had grown brighter for Marcus. He was no longer the quiet newcomer who walked with his head down. He had built strength inside himself, strength that showed in his studies, in basketball, and in the way he carried himself through the hallways. But true transformation doesn't stop with personal growth. It often gets tested in ways no one expects. One cold afternoon, that test arrived. The school was buzzing after basketball practice. Students were heading home, laughing, joking, or hurrying to catch their buses. Marcus stayed behind, shooting a few extra baskets like he always did. The gym echoed with the sound of the ball bouncing, the swoosh of the net, and his steady breathing. It was his ritual, a way to end the day with focus. As he was packing up to leave, he noticed something unusual near the lockers at the far end of the hallway. A small group of students stood in a circle, whispering and pointing. Curious, Marcus walked closer. That's when he saw him, the tallest of the bullies, the same boy who had pushed him, mocked him, and made his first months at school miserable. But now, he wasn't laughing. He was on the ground, his backpack ripped open, his books and papers scattered. Two older boys Marcus hadn't seen before were standing over him, smirking. One of them nudged the bully's notebook with his foot and said, "What's wrong? Can't stand up for yourself?" For a moment, Marcus froze. His mind raced. Here was the boy who had made his life a nightmare. Here was the same face that had sneered at him in the cafeteria, the same hands that had shoved him on the basketball court. And now that boy was on the other side of humiliation. Marcus had a choice. He could turn away and let it happen. He could walk past, pretending he hadn't seen anything, the way so many had done when he was the one being bullied. Part of him, deep down, even felt a flicker of satisfaction. Wasn't this justice? Wasn't this the universe paying him back? But then he remembered the nights he had cried quietly, the mornings he had dreaded school, the way it felt when no one stood up for him. And in that moment, Marcus knew, if he walked away, he would be no better than the bullies who had tormented him. Taking a deep breath, Marcus stepped forward. "Hey," he called out, his voice strong and clear. "Leave him alone." The older kids turned, surprised to see Marcus standing there. One of them laughed. "And who are you?" "His bodyguard." Marcus didn't flinch. He walked closer, keeping his eyes steady. "He doesn't need to be treated like that. Pick on someone else, or better yet, don't pick on anyone at all." The older boys exchanged glances. They weren't used to being challenged, especially not by someone younger. For a moment, it seemed like they might fight back. But something in Marcus's tone, something in the way he stood tall and unshaken, made them hesitate. Finally, with a dismissive snort, they muttered, "Whatever. Not worth it." They walked off, leaving the bully on the floor with his scattered belongings. Silence filled the hallway. The bully slowly gathered his books, his face red not just from embarrassment, but from shock. He looked up at Marcus, confused. "Why? Why did you do that?" he asked quietly. Marcus shrugged. "Because it was the right thing to do." He bent down, picked up a notebook, and handed it to him. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and for the first time, Marcus didn't see a sneer or cruelty. He saw vulnerability. He saw a boy, not so different from himself, who had just been reminded what it felt like to be powerless. The bully mumbled, "Thanks." The word sounded strange coming from him, but it was real. He stood up, clutching his books, and walked away slowly, glancing back at Marcus once before disappearing down the hall. That night, Marcus couldn't stop thinking about what had happened. Helping the boy who had made his life miserable wasn't easy. It was the hardest choice he had made. But deep inside, Marcus felt something powerful. He had proven not just to the bullies, but to himself, that his strength was not about revenge or cruelty. His strength came from compassion, from rising above the cycle of hate. The next day at school, things were different. The bully didn't sit with his old group at lunch. Instead, he walked past Marcus, gave him a small nod, and kept moving. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was respect. And respect was something Marcus had earned, not just by standing up for himself, but by showing kindness even to those who didn't deserve it. Over time, word spread about what Marcus had done. Students whispered about how he had defended someone who once tormented him. For many, it was a lesson, a reminder that real strength isn't about hurting others. Real strength is about standing up, even when it's hard, and showing grace. When no one expects it, that was the true turning point. The bullies lost their power because Marcus had risen above them. And now even they couldn't deny the truth. Marcus was not just unbreakable, he was unstoppable. The final months of the school year brought a change that no one could ignore. Marcus, once the quiet newcomer, now walked the halls with calm confidence. His steps were steady, his shoulders upright, and his eyes carried a quiet fire. He was no longer defined by the whispers or the laughter of bullies. He had defined himself. The cafeteria, once his least favorite place, had transformed into a symbol of how far he had come. He no longer sat alone. Friends gathered at his table, classmates who admired his courage and respected his kindness. Some came for his jokes, some for his study tips, and others simply because they felt stronger around him. The same boy who once ate in silence was now surrounded by laughter, conversation, and genuine connection. But what made Marcus truly unstoppable wasn't popularity or attention. It was the way he had learned to carry his pain and transform it into purpose. He didn't just stand up for himself anymore. He stood up for others. Whenever he saw someone being teased or left out, Marcus would step in, just as he had done. For the bully who once tormented him, his voice was calm, his words firm, and his presence carried weight. People listened when Marcus spoke. Basketball had also become more than just a sport for him. It was where his discipline, resilience, and drive shone the brightest. Game after game, Marcus proved himself as not only a talented player, but also a team leader. He wasn't the loudest on the court, but his determination inspired his teammates. When the team was down, Marcus played harder. When others grew tired, he pushed forward. Coaches noticed. Teachers noticed. Even parents in the stands whispered about the boy who seemed to rise above every challenge. One evening, after a big win, Marcus's coach pulled him aside. "You've got more than skill, Marcus. You've got heart. That's what makes a real player. That's what makes a leader." Those words stayed with Marcus. They weren't just about basketball, they were about life. The bullies, too, were no longer the same. They didn't shout across the cafeteria anymore. They didn't shove him in the hallways. In fact, they had grown quieter. Some of them avoided his eyes, others gave him respectful nods, and one or two even tried to speak to him normally. The balance had shifted. Marcus hadn't crushed them with fists or insults, he had risen above them, and in doing so, he had taken away their power. One of the biggest moments came near the end of the year. The school held an assembly on kindness and respect, inviting students to share their experiences. To Marcus's surprise, one of the teachers asked him to speak. At first, Marcus hesitated, speaking in front of the whole school. His stomach twisted at the thought. But then he remembered the boy he once was, the one who sat alone, who stayed silent, who felt invisible. He realized he owed it to that version of himself and to every student who felt the same way to share his story. Standing on the stage, Marcus looked out at the sea of faces, students, teachers, even the bullies. His hands shook at first, but then he took a deep breath and began. "I used to feel like I didn't belong here," he said. "I used to think the words people said about me were true, that I wasn't good enough, that I was different in the wrong way. But I learned something important. The only people who can define you are the ones you let define you. And I decided that the bullies don't get to decide who I am. I do." The auditorium was silent. Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "I know what it feels like to be laughed at, pushed around, made to feel small. And I also know what it feels like to rise above it. Not by fighting back with anger, but by believing in yourself, working hard, and refusing to break. You don't have to be the loudest, or the biggest, or the toughest. You just have to keep standing. And when you keep standing, no one can stop you." When he finished, the crowd erupted into applause. Teachers beamed with pride, students cheered. And even some of the bullies clapped quietly. Marcus stood there, his heart pounding. But this time, it wasn't from fear, it was from victory. That day, Marcus realized something powerful. His story wasn't just his own anymore. It belonged to everyone who had ever felt small, invisible, or unwanted. His courage gave them courage. His resilience gave them hope. At home, Marcus's parents hugged him tightly. "We're so proud of you," his mother whispered. His father, who rarely showed emotion, wiped a tear from his eye. Marcus smiled, not because he had become popular or admired, but because he had stayed true to himself. He had faced racism, bullying, and hate. He had stumbled, cried, and almost broken. But through it all, he had risen not with revenge, not with anger, but with strength, compassion, and determination. Marcus was no longer just the newcomer. He was no longer just the boy who had been bullied. He was the boy who had become unstoppable. And his story was only the beginning.